Imagine standing at the edge of a cliff, peering into a reality so dense, so intensely concentrated with human life, poverty, chaos, and yet an inexplicable, vibrant form of resilience that it redefines everything you thought you knew about survival. This is not a travelogue about exotic lands. It is an expedition into the geopolitical and human paradox that is Bangladesh. It is a world where a nation of over 173 million people, a population greater than Russia, is squeezed into a territory the size of Iowa. This isn't just a high population density. It is an existential compression that forces every aspect of life, labor, faith, commerce, and even love, to bend and fracture in ways that defy Western logic. Could you name a place where the simple act of breathing, or the simple act of wearing a shirt, links you directly to a struggle for dignity happening thousands of miles away? Bangladesh is a country that the global economy depends on, yet one that most of the world only acknowledges through a fleeting news headline about a disaster. But behind the statistics of pollution and poverty lies a narrative of human adaptation that is both heartbreaking and profoundly inspiring. This is a story about the structural forces that turn a nation of rivers into a land of toxic waste, that turn a child's natural curiosity into a 12-hour workday, and that forces people to find a home on the exterior of a moving train. If you've ever wondered about the true cost of fast fashion, or what happens when a natural catastrophe meets unchecked industrial greed, you owe it to yourself to see the full picture. Number 1. The Engineered Crisis, fast fashion's Faustian bargain. When you examine the label of a shirt, a dress, or a piece of high-end attire, from the racks of Zara to the boutiques of Gucci, there is a startling probability that the thread you touch was spun, cut, and stitched by a woman earning a pittance in Dhaka or Chittagong. Bangladesh is not just one of the world's largest clothing exporters, it is the second largest globally, a distinction built almost entirely on the promise of the cheapest labor costs imaginable. The global demand for ever-changing, disposable fashion has created a monstrous economic engine that runs on the backs of exploited workers. And it is here that we find the heart of a deep moral imbalance. We talk about the low wages, less than $3 a day for shifts that often stretch to 14 grueling hours. But the true catastrophe lies in the systemic disregard for human life. When a company calculates the cost of a finished garment, they factor in fabric, dye, transport, and profit margin. They rarely, if ever, factor in the cost of a human lung. Workers, predominantly young women under 25, who have migrated from impoverished villages with the hope of a slightly better life, are subjected to working conditions that are not only illegal by international standards, but are actively lethal. They handle potent toxic dyes and chemicals, the very substances that give your clothes their vibrant color, with minimal or no protective gear. Poor ventilation traps these invisible poisons, leading to a grim reality. Many of these workers do not live to see their 50th birthday, succumbing to respiratory diseases, cancers, and chronic illnesses born of constant chemical exposure. The most visceral symbol of this manufactured crisis is the memory of the Rana Plaza disaster in 2013. The collapse of that 8-story garment factory building, which killed over 130 people and injured thousands more, was not a natural accident. It was a predictable consequence of corporate negligence and a profound failure of regulatory oversight. That structure was built on unsuitable ground, with unapproved floors added, and was known to have dangerous cracks. Yet, workers were forced to enter the building under threat of losing their jobs. This single event didn't just expose a dangerous building. It exposed the dangerous foundation upon which the entire global fast fashion industry is built. a relentless race to the bottom, where human safety is the first and cheapest casualty in the pursuit of marginal profit. Every new collection, every sale, every discounted item we purchase is subsidized by the compromised health and stolen youth of these laborers. Number 2. The Megacity Syndrome. A nation drowning in density. This intense industrial exploitation unfolds against a backdrop of demographic pressure, unlike almost any other place on the planet. Bangladesh is a land defined by its rivers, over 700 of them, which historically provided fertile soil and arteries for commerce. But that same flat, low-lying geography that once sustained life now amplifies its vulnerability. Dhaka, the capital, exemplifies what we call the megacity syndrome. It is an urban environment where the influx of rural migrants, driven out by climate change, rising sea levels, and the lack of opportunity in villages, has utterly overwhelmed its capacity to function. In this environment of relentless crowding, the most basic function of civilization, sanitation, has utterly broken down. The images are genuinely disturbing. Street food prepared mere feet from raw, overflowing sewage, utensils rinsed in murky, stagnant water, food exposed to the baking sun and clouds of flies. This isn't just poor hygiene, it's a public health time bomb. The constant cycling of waterborne pathogens, cholera, typhoid, hepatitis, through the population is a continuous source of endemic disease, taxing the already meager healthcare system. When 173 million people are trying to share such limited space and resources, the luxury of personal hygiene becomes an impossibility for millions. But the sheer density of human life has also created a dark, unspoken workforce: the manual scavengers. These invisible men of the sewers perform a job so degrading and dangerous that it feels like a relic from another century. Deep beneath the bustling streets, they descend into manholes and drainage systems, sometimes chest-deep in human waste and industrial effluent, with nothing but a basic shovel and their bare hands. They lack safety ropes, gas masks, or even simple boots. The risks are unimaginable: suffocation from methane gas, which is constantly building up, drowning in the slurry, or contracting life-ending infectious diseases. They keep the vast, chaotic city of Dhaka from grinding to a halt. Yet they are paid mere dollars a day, trapped in a job that is a direct consequence of a failed political will to modernize the city's sanitation infrastructure. Their existence is a physical manifestation of the deep class divisions and the systemic failure to value the lives of the most marginalized. It is a necessary evil that allows the rest of the city and the global supply chain to keep moving. Number 3. The world's most dangerous junkyard, where ships go to die. If the textile industry represents the hidden cost of consumerism on human health, then the Chittagong ship graveyard represents the apocalyptic end stage of global commerce. This is not a recycling center. It is the world's largest ship demolition zone, a vast, muddy stretch of beach where gargantuan oil tankers and cargo vessels are hauled ashore to be manually disassembled. It is, unequivocally, one of the most hazardous workplaces on Earth, a place where profit is extracted from danger in its purest, most brutal form. Picture a ship built to withstand the fury of the open ocean, now being reduced to scrap metal by men with little more than hammers, acetylene torches, and their bare hands. These vessels are teeming with toxic materials: asbestos, heavy metals, vast quantities of leftover oil sludge, and even radioactive waste. In the developed world, the disposal of such waste requires complex, heavily regulated, and expensive industrial processes. In Chittagong, it requires a worker earning next to nothing, wearing sandals, and perhaps a thin bandana over his mouth. The lack of basic safety equipment is not an oversight. It's the economic model. The true toll is staggering. Workers suffer routinely from severe respiratory problems, chronic chemical burns, and diseases from metal exposure, often handling materials they have no idea are lethally toxic. Accidents are frequent, resulting in devastating injuries, amputations, and immediate fatalities. The workforce here, much like the textile industry, is comprised of men drawn from rural poverty with the false promise of steady work. They trade their health and their future for a minimal wage, operating in a vacuum of labor protections. The environmental fallout is equally catastrophic, turning the local ecology into a wasteland. As the ships are cut apart on the beach, toxic fluids, heavy metals, and oil residue are simply allowed to leach directly into the Bay of Bengal. This continuous poisoning destroys coastal fishing grounds, impacting the livelihoods of entire communities that depend on the sea for sustenance, creating a vicious cycle where environmental collapse pushes more desperate people into the arms of dangerous, polluting industries for survival. This graveyard is a sobering reminder that the objects we use to facilitate global trade, the vessels of commerce, often end their lives creating profound human and ecological suffering in the most vulnerable corners of the planet. Number 4. The stolen years, when childhood becomes labor. In a functioning society, childhood is a period of protected development, a time for play, for learning, and for building the foundational skills necessary for a productive adult life. In Bangladesh, for millions, childhood is simply an early entry point into the labor market. The statistics are chilling. An estimated 4.7 million children between the ages of 5 and 14 are trapped in various forms of labor. This isn't children helping out around the home. This is systemic, debilitating exploitation. Imagine a 5-year-old spending 10 hours a day, not in a classroom, but in a brick kiln under the scorching sun, hauling heavy molds, breathing in fine particulate dust, and exposed to extreme heat that stuns their growth. Other children toil in the same dangerous textile factories as their mothers, exposed to the same toxic chemicals, their smaller, developing bodies absorbing the poison far faster. Others work as domestic servants, completely hidden from public view and vulnerable to unspeakable abuse with no legal protection or recourse. These children often work longer hours than many adults, upwards of 10 hours daily, for a wage that is less than half what an adult would earn for the same grueling work. This isn't just a consequence of parental poverty forcing a desperate choice. It is a systemic economic failure that exploits the most vulnerable to keep the cost of production artificially low. Child labor robs them of education, which is the only reliable escape route from poverty. Their work damages their health, stunts their physical and cognitive development, and almost guarantees that they will remain trapped in the same cycle of destitution as their parents. The short-term economic necessity of child labor ensures a long-term future of entrenched, generational poverty, preventing the nation from developing the skilled, educated workforce it desperately needs to move past its current struggles. Number 5. Air and water. The toxification of life. Take a moment to simply inhale. In many parts of Bangladesh, that simple, life-sustaining action is an act of self-poisoning. The country routinely battles for the title of the worst air quality in the world, with Dhaka often topping the charts as the most polluted city on Earth. This extreme pollution is a toxic cocktail created by a convergence of environmental negligence and infrastructure collapse. The primary culprits are multi-layered. Millions of poorly maintained, decades-old buses and vehicles spewing black, unfiltered diesel exhaust. countless unregulated industries pumping out plumes of chemicals, the constant, unregulated burning of trash and biomass for fuel, and the perpetual choking dust clouds generated by endless, poorly managed construction projects. During the dry winter months, this particulate matter, often smaller than 2.5 micrometers, which can penetrate deep into the lungs and bloodstream, becomes trapped by atmospheric conditions, enveloping Dhaka in a dense, suffocating blanket of smog. The air is so thick that visibility can be reduced to just a few feet. The human cost of this atmospheric disaster is terrifying. Air pollution is directly responsible for more than 150,000 premature deaths annually in Bangladesh. Respiratory diseases, asthma, chronic bronchitis, lung infections are not just common ailments, they are epidemic. Living in Dhaka is like smoking a pack of cigarettes a day, simply by existing outdoors. And if the air is poison, the water is its mirror image. The rivers, once the lifeblood of the nation, have become toxic open sewers. For decades, industries have used the rivers as free, convenient dumping grounds for chemical dyes, industrial byproducts, and heavy metals. Cities and villages have contributed by using these same rivers for unregulated disposal of human waste and garbage. This cumulative effect is a profound environmental trauma. Rivers now run black with chemical sludge, often topped with industrial foam. The fish that once sustained millions have disappeared, and the water is so polluted that mere contact can cause severe skin infections. Communities that depended on these waterways for fishing, agriculture, and daily needs have watched their livelihoods die. The tragedy is that this scale of environmental destruction is largely irreversible in the short term, forcing hundreds of thousands to flee their traditional homes and migrate to the already impossibly crowded cities, compounding the urban crisis. Number 6. The illogical movement. Transportation as an act of desperation. In a country where movement is perpetually hampered by overcrowding and failing infrastructure, transportation transcends a mere commute. It becomes a daily act of defiance against probability, a visual metaphor for the nation's capacity to just keep going. The scenes of Bangladeshi transportation defy all conventional safety and engineering logic. We are talking about buses and trucks that are often decades old, kept running by sheer mechanical ingenuity and necessity, packed far beyond any reasonable or legal capacity. This isn't about standing room only. This is about passengers hanging from the sides of moving vehicles, sitting precariously on rooftops and clinging to bumpers and handholds, utilizing every inch of exterior space just to get from point A to point B. In Dhaka, the capital, a journey of just 3 miles can easily consume over 2 hours during peak traffic, an absurd waste of productivity and human time. The city's millions of rickshaws, bicycle-powered vehicles carrying passengers, are operated by men who are often painfully thin, yet they spend their days pedaling through scorching, polluted heat for a wage that barely covers their own survival. They are the human engines of the city's microeconomy, pushing their bodies past exhaustion to move the commerce and people that the broken public transit system cannot handle. The most iconic and shocking image of this movement is the train system. During rush hour, the trains become a spectacle of collective desperation. Passengers not only fill every compartment, they cover every possible external surface. They sit on the roof, hang from the windows, and cling to the ladders. This isn't recreation. It is the only way to move in a system fundamentally incapable of serving the population it exists to support. Every single journey on a Bangladeshi train or bus during peak time is a profound risk, yet for millions, it is the only path to work, to education, or to a family connection. It encapsulates the deep, daily dilemma of Bangladesh, the necessity of movement versus the near impossibility of safe passage. Number 7. The unseen systems, social rules as survival mechanisms. In the West, we view social customs largely through the lens of tradition or personal choice. In Bangladesh, where 173 million people are constantly pressed against one another, traditional customs and rigid etiquette take on a different, far more critical function. They are essential survival mechanisms. These social rules create the necessary boundaries that allow a community to coexist peacefully when privacy and personal space are non-existent. Consider public displays of affection. Even between married couples, these are strictly forbidden. This isn't merely religious conservatism, it's a necessary social filter in an environment of impossible crowding. When people are constantly forced into close proximity, on buses, in markets, on trains, strict social boundaries become critical to maintaining harmony and preventing conflicts that might otherwise erupt from constant intrusion and lack of space. The rules create a predictable social framework. Dress codes function similarly, particularly for women. Modest clothing isn't just an act of religious observance, it is a practical measure for showing respect for community values and, crucially, avoiding unwanted attention or confrontation in crowded public spaces where standing out can be dangerous or misinterpreted. These norms, while appearing restrictive to an outsider, allow millions of people to navigate complex situations with a shared, understood code of conduct. Even something as seemingly minor as littering carries a greater social significance. In cities already overwhelmed by waste management failure, throwing trash on the street isn't just rude, it actively contributes to the public health crises and environmental disasters that affect everyone. The social pressure against littering is the community's attempt to maintain dignity and prevent utter collapse, despite the systemic failures of government sanitation. These unwritten, often harsh, social contracts are what hold the pressurized fabric of Bangladeshi society together, allowing diverse communities to coexist despite facing challenges that would fracture many developed nations. Number 8. The paradox of faith and family. Adapting tradition to scarcity. The pressures of overcrowding and scarcity have led to unique adaptations in the cultural and familial structure of Bangladesh, showcasing how deep-seated traditions morph to ensure collective survival. We see this in the startling persistence of profound gender inequality and the strange, necessary adaptations within remote tribes. Despite recent advancements, gender inequality remains deeply entrenched. The statistics on child marriage are staggering. Approximately 51% of girls in Bangladesh are married before their 18th birthday, one of the highest rates in the world. This practice is driven by a complex mix of poverty, reducing the financial burden on the family, traditional views on female honor, and a legal system that often compounds the problem. For instance, inheritance laws rooted in Islamic Sharia often grant men double the share of women, effectively ensuring that women remain financially dependent throughout their lives. Even when women achieve work outside the home, as they overwhelmingly do in the garment sector, cultural norms often discourage them from seeking true financial independence or higher education, especially in rural areas where social pressure is intense. The psychological and societal impact of arranged marriages is immense. They dominate society, with family interests, economic status, and social positioning taking precedence over individual emotion or personal compatibility. While the consent of the bride and groom is technically required, the social and familial pressure is often so intense that refusal is not a realistic option, especially for women. The bride's family is frequently required to provide substantial dowries, despite the practice being illegal, turning the arrangement into a complex business transaction where the woman's value is often determined by her family's wealth and reputation, not her potential as an individual. This system often means a young person's future, their education, their career, their dreams, is predetermined by others, creating relationships based on obligation rather than partnership, a necessary sacrifice made to maintain social hierarchy and economic stability. Number 9. Crime and the sacred. The surreal landscape of survival. In the vast, chaotic cities, desperation and overcrowding turn crime from a moral failing into a dark means of survival, weaving an intricate systemic layer into the daily life of urban centers like Dhaka. Here, crime isn't random. It is an organized, calculated ecosystem that affects everyone. In crowded public spaces, the chaotic bus stations, the packed markets, pickpocketing and petty theft are so common they are almost considered an inevitability of city life. Coordinated gangs utilize the confusion of boarding, departing, and dense movement as perfect cover, robbing passengers trapped in tight spaces. What makes this particularly pernicious is the deep mistrust in law enforcement. Many residents believe that filing a report will bring more hassle, stigma, or cost than help, meaning a vast number of crimes go unreported. This normalizes the danger, forcing residents to live in a state of quiet tension, constantly alert, rarely at ease. The true cost of this constant crime is not just the lost possessions, but the exhausting loss of peace of mind for millions. Juxtaposed against this gritty reality is the surreal element of the sacred. Despite Bangladesh being a predominantly Muslim country where beef is consumed, the substantial Hindu minority reveres cows as sacred, a reverence that is deeply woven into the broader cultural fabric. This creates bizarre contrasts, such as a cow lying down in the center of Dhaka's chaotic traffic, causing a complete stop. No one moves the cow. Traffic must simply navigate around it. The sacred status of the animal transcends the practical, desperate needs of urban infrastructure. Perhaps most shocking to Western sensibilities are the ancient, often extreme, Hindu rituals involving cow waste. For some groups, cow urine and feces are considered purifying, even divine. There are festivals where devotees bathe in fresh manure, believing it will cure diseases, cleanse them of sins, and bring profound spiritual connection. For outsiders, this is incomprehensible. For participants, it is a moment of deep faith and cultural identity that survives the relentless tide of modern industrial chaos. This blend of the utterly practical, crime as survival, and the profoundly spiritual, sacred manure, creates a cultural landscape of almost unbearable tension and contradiction. This is the ultimate paradox of Bangladesh, a nation constantly on the edge, yet somehow always enduring. The story of Bangladesh is not merely a catalogue of disasters. It is a profound testament to human ingenuity and determination in the face of structural adversity. From the impossible courage of the men dismantling oil tankers on the beach, to the resilience of families maintaining their livelihoods on floating markets when land-based commerce fails, Bangladesh showcases an incredible capacity to adapt, endure, and find meaning even in the most challenging circumstances imaginable. What we have explored today, the human cost of fast fashion, the choking pollution, the dignity of the manual scavenger, the profound sacrifice of childhood, should not just shock you. It should inspire a deeper understanding. The next time you put on a piece of clothing or take a simple, clean breath, remember the immense, unseen struggle happening in this compressed, vibrant nation. If you found this exploration fascinating, you'll want to watch our entire playlist on Fascinating Discovery, where we delve into more countries facing incredible challenges. You can find the link on the screen right now. Don't forget to check out the video displayed next. It's another fascinating discovery that we know you'll love. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey. Please give this video a like, share it with someone who needs to see this story of resilience, and subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next deep dive. Wishing you the best of luck in your own journey to seek truth and understanding.